Hello and welcome to this week's Future Talk with Liz Buchanan. I'm a digital communications expert and I'm joined by Shara Evans, one of the world's top female futurists, as designated by Forbes in early 2020. We are talking anything before life during and after coronavirus and how technology and all the things that are going to impact our life. So welcome, Shara.
Hello, Liz. Great to see you again. And hello, everybody who's listening. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about the sharing economy, which really has become a way of life for so many of us over the last decade, whether it's sharing our homes or sharing our bicycles or our cars, almost anything you can think of, it's part of the gig economy. And one of the large companies in this space is AirBNB. And I'm sure you're familiar with that. Liz, have you stayed in Airbnb?
I've stayed in stays, which is pretty much the same thing.
Yeah. So we're still in the middle of the pandemic, obviously. Yeah. In Australia, we're relatively lucky that we've not had as big a wave as many other nations around the world. And unfortunately, one of the countries that has copped it the worst is in the United States. And as you can tell from my accent, I was actually born in the US. I'm a dual citizen, Aussie and American, and I still have a lot of family there. So I talk to people all the time. And I was recently reading an article about Airbnb in the USA, enjoying a new burst of people making bookings right now in the middle of a pandemic, as there are lots and lots of new cases every single day in the United States. People are so sick of being cooped up that they're making bookings at Airbnb residences, apartments, and so on. And the article didn't specify whether these were empty dwellings, in other words, just the people who were renting the place, or whether they were shared. Probably a combination of both. But you have to wonder, they're in the middle of a pandemic there that is really out of control. And in many states in the US, it's actually mandated that you wear masks and do the social distancing thing and so on. Yet people are willing to go into someone else's house and live there because they're just sick of being cooped up. And you have to wonder about it from a safety perspective. First of all, are you actually sharing a dwelling with people that you don't know, who may or may not have been in touch with someone who has the virus and may be asymptomatic, so aside from your family group? But you also don't know how well things might have been cleaned or not, as the case may be. I think you have to do a certain amount of cleaning before you can let out a room or an entire dwelling to someone. But that's not necessarily the same as disinfecting, is it?
No, well, I've heard a friend of mine went to New York, and in the particular apartment that she went to, an Airbnb, they didn't believe in chemicals. So she did actually there was bed lice. There wasn't any chemicals, so it disinfected, and she ended up leaving because it was just too of an experience. But during a pandemic, what is that extra element of cleaning? And if there's new people coming through, and yes, you could get robots to do the cleaning and so forth, but it's still that element of how clean is it, and what actually are the procedures, and is it new sheets? And it is quite scary. Not that we need to be living in a world of paranoia, but we need to be aware of the living spaces that we are going into.
Well, what's interesting is that people apparently in the US are booking Airbnb holidays, but they're not booking holidays at hotels. And you mentioned robots. If anybody's going to have a disinfectant robot, it would be a larger hotel as opposed to a private residence. You're not going to have, you might have a little Roomba vacuum cleaner, but that's not a UV disinfectant robot, which is something that we're starting to see in some of the larger venues, and there's some good ones that are coming onto the market. But it goes beyond just Airbnb. It's the whole sharing economy. And what is the impact of COVID-19 going to be on the sharing economy? Will people be reluctant to get into a rideshare car, whether it's Uber, Lyft, or even just a taxi, because they may not know who was in the seat before them 2 minutes ago? And even if you take precautions as an owner of a car that you're sharing, whether it be Uber or a taxi, it doesn't really matter. Are you going to disinfect between every single passenger?
Well, that's the procedures. I've seen that they've notified that is the procedures that will be put in place. But, it'll be interesting to see what people think is, do they trust Airbnbs or taxis or Uber, even going into lifts. If it's a crowded lift, will you wait for the next one or will you go in? It'll be interesting what people think.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I'm not about to go into a crowded lift.
Yep.
Here in Australia, there was a ruling a few weeks back that said, well, social distancing is still required, except if you're going into an office lift, we'll allow an exception there. And to me, that is an idiotic thing to do, because here we've got a whole bunch of people who do not wear masks, unlike in other countries, and you're crowding them into a confined space for a short period of time. And even if you've got a contact tracing app, you're literally in a metal box, which is a Faraday cage. So you're not going to be able to figure out who was in that lift with you after the fact anyhow. And you're with them for a short period of time, and who knows if somebody sneezed on the handrail that you happen to touch. I personally wear a mask and latex gloves because I don't want to take the chance of catching it. I know that wearing a mask provides only a modicum of protection for the mask wearer. It basically stops me from touching my face when I'm out in public. But what it really does is it protects other people. So if I wear a mask and gloves, I'm actually protecting everybody that's around me, because if I happen to sneeze, whether it's just a regular sneeze or a flu or COVID-19, it's going to be inside the mask, not spraying spittle all around the place.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's scary of what's actually going to happen, and how's it actually going to change our lives, or are we going to just get used to it, or are we actually going to put those elements in place, and what does it mean for our holiday and the tourism industry, really?
Well, tourism is an industry that's taken a big hit, and
yeah.
as you know, I'm a professional keynote speaker, so I'm in the events industry, and wow, have we taken a big hit, because we're not allowed to congregate en masse. And there are a lot of people in the event space, not just speakers. It's the people who do the staging and the hotels and the catering and the videographers and the editors and the event planners, and the list goes on and on and on. You wouldn't believe how long the trail is. But all of this is impacting our society and how we get together, and I definitely think it will impact the sharing economy in some way, shape, or form. I wonder if we'll start to see people taking up the sharing economy again here in Australia, because we've been relatively lucky, but it really did take me by surprise that this was happening in the US, where they are still mounting new cases on a regular basis.
Yeah, it is scary, but that's all we've got time for today.
Yes. Anyway, great chatting with you.
Good chatting with you. See you next time.
Bye, Liz. Bye, everyone.